now, rather than waiting to the end of January. So, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I'd like to turn this over to Fred for a moment. And then Fred, if it'd be okay, you could turn it over to your engineer folks.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. One point I want us to cover, if you don't mind, and you may be able to just answer this directly. Offline, there have been some conversations about the $7 million that came from the legislature. I think it was under HB 2017. And was there a specific designation that would be divided equally between counties, or was the $7 million directly allocated or appropriated to the CDA just in general terms? Just for my clarification so that I understand as we move forward.
Yeah, so technically the money was allocated to the Columbia Development Authority to be determined by the board. With that said, there really was an understanding among previous board members that those dollars would be dispersed for the highest and best use. And there's also an understanding that those dollars would be divided between the two counties. And so multiple conversations have occurred, Mr. Chair. At the end of the day, no final determination has been made.
And the road design understood that those conversations had taken place.
That is correct. And so what you have before you is a 10% design with half the proceeds being utilized on the Umatilla County side of the line and the other half utilized on the Morrow County side of the line. I would share with you, there's lots of additional thoughts and ideas out there, but for today and today's meeting, this is where we are.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that clarification. Fred, we're ready for you.
Thank you very much. We have, as Greg mentioned, we have designed this road project to be in phases to present to you as a point of making a decision. I think the 10% design, we have been having a weekly meeting with Anderson Perry. They've done a good job of coming very quickly with the answer that we were looking for. We have sent that all to all of you. I think Debbie sent it to you this morning. So you have it in your hand. If you don't have it, we will make sure you get it with the map and so on. The 10% design, again, these are high level design discussion. The idea was design, the Anderson Perry will design this for 100%. So by the time we get done with the design, it will be the whole 6.1 miles would be covered as part of the design. The numbers that are in front of you is, again, it shows how much we can do as part of the 7 million. We broke it down. They did a good job of breaking it down for you to make that decision. How much 7 million will buy, and where is the remainder of funding going to come from to finish it up. But as far as the design, it will be the entire road all the way to the west end. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andy, I believe, or to Andy Lindsay, and also Brad Bird will go quickly over the numbers.
So just very quickly, Fred, from what I can see that is being presented on our screen, we have 7, and the initial cost estimate as of 2024, with no bids having gone out or anything, is 14 million and some change.
That's correct. This is, again, 10% is extremely high level. These numbers will be adjusted once we get to 30 and 60%. Again, future kind of as far as the inflation and some of the costs are coming down, so we may be able to reduce that, but these are not bid numbers, no.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for the introduction, Fred. I'm Andy Lindsay with Anderson Perry and been doing most of the design work on here. I may just share my screen if that's okay, so I can just kind of drive the picture a little bit. Let's see. Did that figure pop up there? Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. So this is kind of the overall big picture view of the alignment of the property. And again, as Fred said, our directive has been to design to 100% the entire length of the project, full project. And then obviously we know the current budget doesn't support construction of the full project, but we've sort of broken that out into a couple different sections with some options for you guys to choose from. So I think part of the other document that you saw is kind of this pre-designed summary. This is not the full report. This is just kind of a summary of what we'll put together in a full report for you. Just kind of goes through the project description, some of our design criteria, assumptions on those things. And we'll get to that in a minute. I think it's probably easiest if we start, I think, with the alignment. That's kind of the bulk of it. And then I expect there'll be some more discussions around the cost part, so maybe we save that till the end. But essentially, this is the overall view of the layout. Here's the Camp Reese facility, the interchange exit 177, and then exit 10 on the I-82 side. So we'll start going through these figures on the very west end of the property. Jump over to here. So there is an existing access road that goes this whole length. So starting on that west end, we'll try to keep that alignment along that existing road as much as we can. We want to abut that up to that property line and the railroad line as close as we can. You'll see in some cases like here, and as we get to a couple other spots, that property line does jog in and out just a little bit. So we obviously don't want to be zigzagging the road all over the place. So we may be further away from the property line in some cases rather than others. Along this alignment, there are several access roads, existing roads that we'll want to tie into. Obviously, the Western Patrol Road at the end, we'll want to tie into that. Here along the boundary between the unrestricted and the restricted parcels, there's A Avenue, which is a connection we want to tie into. And there's also, I think three or four, I can't remember, we'll get to those, kind of existing or old railroad crossings. There are a lot of railroad lines on the site. Currently, some of these have been just paved over. It does look like the rails are still there, but they've been just paved over. We'd suggest kind of restoring those crossings so they are functional, keeping the rails in place. Obviously, they may need to be updated at some point in the future if those were ever used. But I think it makes sense at this point to plan on keeping those crossings intact. So as we move to the east, again, you can see kind of places where the property line jogs a little bit there, another rail crossing. And then this is the CDA property boundary. Again, there's another access road there, Juniper Road, with another rail crossing that we would propose tying into. Again, here you can see this jogs quite a bit. So we'll try as much as we can, and we'll have a better feel for this once we get our topographic survey and our field data completed and get further into the design as far as profiles and alignments of where we can stay mostly on that existing roadway alignment. Further to the east, here's the main entrance to the OMD facility. And you can see here's the underpass. So we do need to kind of jog up to the north to get away from that underpass to create that intersection with what is called Cedar Street. And that's the main entrance to the OMD parcel. Then once we get beyond that, we'll kind of jog up to the north. And then there is, capability for this property on the south and the north side of that access road to be developed. So that's why we jog north a little bit there. We didn't identify, there was a future CDA access road to go to the north here, and potentially maybe a future access for the OMD here. So, you know, maybe makes sense to design for, plan for a future access road there. Not that that would be done immediately, but just looking at things that might be beneficial for the future to look at. And down finally to the far eastern end, we'll tie into exit 10 on the Westland Road interchange there off of I-82. This, what you see here in this kind of the darker thing, that's a future design for those off-ramp improvements that ODOT has identified in their interchange area management plan. Those would not be constructed with this project, but we have, you know, we would design the project to accommodate that future improvement there. And also there is quite a large elevation drop between the off-ramp and basically ground level of the CDA property, probably about 20 feet there. So we will have a significant embankment slope here, which will have a little bit of earthwork to do there. And then the other issue here is this East Patrol Road access road. That's been defined as a access easement for CTUIR to access their property to the north. Obviously, this embankment here would cut that road in half, so we need to reconnect that somehow. What we'd propose is an access point down here where you could connect into these existing roads by the igloos. And then if you go further north in that road, that jogs back over to the patrol road. So that'd be the easiest access point rather than building a whole nother, you know, 1,500 feet of road to access over here. Let's see. Right, with the interchange, we can't have an access point closer than a quarter mile. That's Oregon access management policy. So that's why you don't have this access down until down at the bottom of the hill there. So that's the basics of the alignment. Again, we've kind of laid this out similar to, I think, what you've seen before. No big real surprises. We'll back up here a little bit. We'll get into some of the design criteria. We've designed these curves, for basically a 45-mile-an-hour design speed. And there is, we could potentially scoot this a little bit closer, but I think that works out the best there. I'm going to jump over. Maybe I'll just keep the maps on the screen and then kind of talk about some of the items in our summary as far as design criteria and assumptions. With this being access to industrial lands, significant quantities of industrial land, we need to anticipate pretty high levels of truck traffic in the future. That's really what this is designed for. So we've chosen to kind of classify this as a rural arterial in terms of design criteria. And really what that means is, kind of sets us up for, setting a design speed, 45-mile-an-hour design speed, which controls these curvatures, the profile, and designing for vehicles to be able to travel through here safely. As far as design vehicles, we'll design for what's called a WB67, which is the kind of the standard large interstate truck and trailer. So that those types of vehicles will be able to make all the maneuvers in and out of this facility. That primarily will come into play at the main intersection here with the OMD entrance and at the off ramp on the east end at exit 10. Other kind of design assumptions, and some of these things are things that are somewhat flexible and will be fleshed out a little bit more as we get into further detail. We've assumed a pavement section of 12 inches of aggregate, 6 inches of asphalt. And again, as we complete more work and finish our geotech investigation and our pavement design report, those things will help us narrow that down a little bit to whether that's too much or not enough, or some of those things can affect cost estimates as we move forward. As far as travel lanes width, we're proposing 2 travel lanes, just 1 in each direction, 14-foot lanes, which is a little bit wider than what you'd consider normal standards. But I do think in the industrial setting, those wider lanes help out with access in and out of other future access roads, and just make it a little more ease of navigation for the larger vehicles. Let's see. One thing I did want to point out too, again here, this kind of shows you that typical section that we talked about: 14-foot travel lanes, 4-foot shoulders. We're assuming stormwater is going to be handled by just roadside drainage swales. And again, as we finish our geotechnical report, that will help us, inform that and confirm those decisions as well. The thing I did want to point out, and this map is a little bit hard to see, but really just wanted to identify and show you that there are a lot of existing utilities along this alignment. You can see these power lines, telephone lines, fiber lines, and other access easements. For example, here's the access easement for the tribes. There's electric utility lines there. So we'll need to accommodate those, and these will all be shown on the drawings as we further our design, get into a little bit more detail. We will accommodate or have accommodation for future utilities, water, sewer, telephone, power, gas. We're proposing, here again, you can see this 20-foot utility corridor on the west end of the project, where we're abutted up against the property line. That would be just on the north side, obviously, where you could access the properties. Once we get past the main entrance there and guide up to the north, where there could be potential development on both sides, we'll show a utility corridor on both sides of the roadway, out of the pavement area, so future utilities can be installed without disturbing the pavement. We probably do want to identify some future utility crossing locations, in that section from, along this section where there could be development on both sides. Identify perhaps at this access location, at some predetermined interval that we can flesh out as we get further along the line. So those would be accommodated. That's the bulk of the information on the alignment part. Again, I think it's pretty similar to what you guys have seen before as far as the conceptual items, a little bit of massaging here and there. And again, that'll continue to get refined to make it efficient as possible. So jump over to here and we'll get into the fun or not so fun part of it, the cost estimates. So what we've done, we prepared an overall cost estimate for the full length of the project. You saw that earlier, around 14.4 million. That's from west end all the way to the east end, everything. Obviously that's well outside the $7 million budget. So what we've done is kind of identified what we've called here as the base project, and then several different additives that you could add on to. So what we're considering the base project is basically from the main entrance of OMD east to exit 10 on Highway 82. That gets you connected to the freeway on both ends, and provides development opportunities on both sides of the roadway through that section. That base section, our cost estimate is about $5 million. And again, this is a summary. We've got these all broken out in these other spreadsheets if you care to dive into the details of those. The first at what we'd call additive would be from that starting going west and just kind of incrementally working your way that direction as money allows. That first additive is basically from the main entrance west to the county line. That's another 1.5 million, which would bring the total cost to 6.5. And then the second additive, that county line west to Juniper Road, which gets access to that first restricted CDA parcel. And that's another 2.5 million. The third additive would be from Juniper Road to A Avenue, which is the beginning of that unrestricted CDA parcel, about 2.9 for that. And then finally, the last one from A Avenue all the way to the western boundary, approximately 2.5 for that. So, and again, the cost estimates are, very preliminary. We're at 10% design. There's a lot of uncertainty still as far as the design goes, as far as pavement section, earthwork quantities. Once we have our survey done and can work on profiles, so I think there's some opportunities here for these costs to come down a little bit. But first, I'd rather start higher and be able to come down than start low and then come back to you and say, tell you don't have enough money. So this is where we're at today. And again, the construction markets have been a little volatile. They're starting to settle a little bit. It appears, but we'll see what happens over the next 6 to 8 months as we finish this design and get things prepared for a full bid package. Let's see. I believe that's kind of the bulk of the information. I mean, if you guys want to open up for questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Anybody has?
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it. I did have questions about the load, and you covered that. Was wondering about the drainage swales and so forth. Does the design have any place across the entire scope of the project? Were there any low spots where we'd be dealing with standing water if we got, that once in a century rain or anything like that?
Sure. Again, we haven't completed our field survey yet, so we haven't identified those areas. Once we have that completed, then we'll be able to adjust our profile. And my thinking is that, instead of, digging this thing down into the ground, we're basically going to clear and grub the organics off the top and build the road up. So the roadway be up above.
You said 12 and 6, so 12 of gravel and then 6 of pavement.
Correct.
That's awesome. Wondered, in terms of the geotech, is this more ditch witch or dynamite in terms of putting utilities in while you're out there?
Oh, my guess is we haven't gotten our field work completed, but my guess is it's pretty easy digging.
Okay, great.
Is my guess.
All right.
We've done a lot of other investigations in this vicinity, and everything is pretty consistent, pretty easy material.
Yeah, I had a question for Brad, if you don't mind, Brad, and that you're muted, but is this in terms of the lane width and so forth comparable to the Wanapa Road that you built in West Umatilla County out in the Conforth and McNary area?
Yeah, I believe it is. Actually, Andy's designed part of that road, so but I think it's the same. And one thing I wanted to note is Andy's preliminary section has the 14-foot travel lanes, which I think are wise. You all have been on the interstate when you have two trucks passing each other. Those are 12-foot lanes, and how tight it can get and how they almost hit each other at times. And yeah, 14-foot travel lanes for this section, I think, will be beneficial. One thing we can think about too is our preliminary section has 4-foot paved shoulders. I mean, if we were to reduce that to 3, and you can imagine just taking a foot off for 6 miles of road, how much money that would save. Yeah, so we can play with maybe 3-foot shoulders are okay, and with 14-foot travel lanes and knock some quantities off this. So, as Andy indicated, we're still pretty preliminary, but I really think the 14-foot travel lanes will be far preferable for such an industrial setting.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Because my assumption is that the counties will own these roads, so I'm looking at the county commissioners who are here with us about any questions that you have and, that sort of thing. But from my perspective, this is awesome. We really appreciate you guys. So, John, looks like you've turned yours off. Commissioner
Yeah,
Schaefer.
the one thing I was kind of wondering about is, could we share that with like Tom Fellows, our roadmaster? Is that something we could have, or? So, great.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I don't know if Commissioner Doran wanted to say anything or not. That's his area of responsibility, but I'll see if he wants to say anything. And maybe he doesn't.
Either way, we sure appreciate you guys having your staff available to look at this, Commissioner. Commissioner Sykes, you have anything there that you want to add or ask?
Well, I would just echo John. We want our roadmaster to take a look at it,
Excellent.
but so far it looks pretty good.
Other questions from anyone for Anderson Perry?
Wait. Yes,
Hi, Lisa.
hi, a couple questions and comments. Nothing yet on a design or preliminary design coming off of the Patterson Ferry interchange into Morrow County. And comment, I thought that we had determined that we were spending $3.5 million on each side of the county line.
I think that's
Mr.
correct.
Chair.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
worth
correct.
checking. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that was my understanding as well. And so part of this conversation is to make sure those things that are accurate or those agreements that we had set forth get honored. So Lisa, I'm on the same page as you.
Okay, so follow-up comments there are we are designing a $14 million project when we have $7 million available.
Mhm.
And where does the rest of the money come from? And should we just be looking at designing a $7 million project?
I have an opinion on that, Lisa, and one of those is that we're at 10% now, 10% design. And if we go with the assumption that you have stated earlier, and we're looking at, let's just say, another 14 on the Morrow County side of the line, now we're looking at 28 and we have $7 million. So I think all of those things are really important factors as we move forward. But so far, what I'm seeing is that we have a road design based on linear feet in a yet to be determined location. And that's where we are at 10%. So I think we continue to engage in this conversation and so forth. And let's see, I saw Don come up with a question and also Brad. Brad, would you go first and then Don Sampson, please, after that? Because we really do want to know if that interchange, especially on the west side, or excuse me, on the east side, is going to work for the CTUIR. So Brad and then
Sure. Oh, I just wanted to point out that in talking with Fred and others at IRZ, and when we were considering the design, the thought process is if we design the whole thing, we'll have it in chunks, and then whatever split you all choose for how to bid it, it'll all be ready. And then if somebody, if Greg were to pull another pile of money out of his hat, and we'd still all be ready to just add it on and bid it. So the idea of designing the whole thing is you'll have everything from west end to east end, and you can pick and choose how you want to bid it, and it'll be ready no matter what you all choose.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
Don?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, so I'm not ready to comment on that location in terms of access to the tribe's property. I'll do a quick internal review on that. I do agree with what Lisa has said. I mean, we had agreed upon splitting that equally on both sides of the county line, right? In terms of the 7 million. And I guess Brad, what's the cost difference between designing the full 14 million versus the 7? Because anything additional cost is obviously going to impact that amount that can go to the construction. So can you give us a ballpark of what that difference is?
Yes, we had it figured out both ways, and Andy tried to correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't a lot more, and we can figure out the number here. And the reason it wasn't a real significant increase is you're already doing all the work for and then getting all set up for the bulk of it. So adding on the little bit more wasn't that much. Andy, do you remember how much it affected our design fee?
I don't recall off the top of my head. It was not a significant amount. I mean, I want to say 10 or 15% maybe.
Yeah, so it's not an economy of scale, because you can imagine you're getting rooted up for the whole thing. It just added a little bit more. So it seems like it was under 100,000, to give you an
Yeah.
idea, the overall
Yeah,
scheme
it
of
was.
things. So
Yes.
it's not a significant to have the whole thing designed and ready to go to cover all your bases, no matter how you choose to proceed.
Mhm.
Right, thank you.
Kelly, did you have a question or a comment? Kelly Doherty, Commissioner Doherty?
I just want to add that I'd like to see a formal budget put in place as a port commissioner. I think that's important that we have that in front of us as well.
And Mr. Chair, this is Greg. I think Commissioner Doherty raises a good point. Prior to any advancing forward, we will make sure that you have a very detailed, broken down budget with timelines and with benchmarks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions, comments? This has been excellent. So Andy, Brad, we really appreciate your work. Fred, thank you. And I see no other hands raised. And my understanding is that there's no action to be taken here. This is an information meeting. Is that correct, Greg?
That is correct. I just wanted to make sure that our 5 board members had an opportunity to express any thoughts, ideas, concerns, et cetera, right now. I think Lisa raised the one issue that sits in the back of everyone's mind, and so I hope I brought clarity to that issue.
Well, and our those on the county commissions can go back to the roadmasters with this, and I'm sure that will add additional issues that need to be answered and addressed as well. So if we're at that point, Greg, to be able to go into executive session, then I would ask you to go ahead and, or you or Debbie, to read the ORS 192660 if we're completely finished here. So anything else before the general body, before those on the board go into executive session?
Mr. Chair.
I want to thank everyone so much for your participation and engagement. And Greg, I'll hand that to you.
Perfect. Debbie, would you mind reading the ORS?
Absolutely.
And Merry Christmas to everyone if we don't see you again.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas to everybody. The Columbia Development Authority may meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 190.610 to ORS 192.690 to I, the employment of Chief Executive Assessed Officer or other public officers, employees and staff, and members of the public body. As well as if an item is moved to accept executive session, the chairman can make a recommendation at this time. In addition to that, ORS 190 and ORS 192, an executive session will be held to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection, including attorney-client privileged information or records, and to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the board to negotiate real property transactions. The executive session is being held pursuant to ORS 192.610 to ORS 192.690 to section 2 and L.
Thank you, Debbie.
Okay, and then I could, what I can do is I can put those folks that are still on the line here that would like to come back after executive session. If there is a motion that's made, I can bring them back into the public hearing.
Thank you.
So let me do that right now. And then how do we want to hand Lisa? Lisa, your group? I can't hear you.
My group is leaving my room.
Okay, and just one more thing I need to be able to do, just 1 second.